Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 5th, 2019 Glendale Housing Authority meeting being called to order at 3:05 p.m. May I please have the roll call?
Authority Member Devine.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Parazian.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Chair Agajanian.
Present. May I please have your report?
The agenda for the February 5th, 2019 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Friday, February 1st, 2019 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next, please?
Next would be approval of minutes. 4A, minutes of the regular Housing Authority meeting of January 15, 2019 and January 29, 2019.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move 4A. Second.
Hearing no objections, the minutes stands approved as submitted. What is next, please?
Next would be 5, oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for investigation and report. We do have 2 cards submitted.
Mr. Herbert Molano, please. Welcome to Glendale.
Yes.
You were absent for a long time.
Yes,
You
I
were
was,
one
and
of
I've been.
the frequent speakers on this dais. So,
I think that for 10 years I did about 600 presentations through this committee.
Are you just visiting, Mr. Milano?
No,
just
I
curious.
live
Are
here.
you?
I'm very active here. Yes, don't worry about it. I'll make my visits short.
Residency.
I'll start. Chair Agajanian, members of the Housing Authority, my name is Herbert Molano. I'm a resident of Glendale. And I'm not running for office, by the way. I'm retired very happily. I wanted to bring up a couple of important points about population and housing. The County of Los Angeles has a shortage of affordable housing that exceeds 500,000 units that are short. And in the 1980s, when Glendale was growing, we provided housing, and that's when I bought in Glendale, we provided housing to the very large influx of Armenians that were coming at the time. And Glendale grew and prospered because of the policies that Glendale had. And obviously I bought in Glendale because I thought it was a city that was conservative and had a very wise government to my thinking at the time. And I think that today we still do. In the last 10 years, Glendale has done a tremendous job, and I think, in my opinion, a fantastic job of creating housing. I love the new buildings that have come up. The design is really great. Being in downtown is a pleasure. There's a dynamism that I really enjoy. But the shortage of housing in Los Angeles is a very serious one in Los Angeles County as well that I want to address. And let me give you a little bit of my background. In 2001, I was president of the Glendale Apartment Association. And I had the pleasure of working with the city at the time and working with many of the local realtors and interest in real estate in multifamily housing. And I've been active for the past few years with the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and I was the executive director. That means that I know in depth the issues that have occurred now in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, West Hollywood, the attempts in Culver City, and the trends that have taken place. And I'd like to be a resource for you with regard to how those ordinances have worked and why in the past 40 years has given the city of Los Angeles such a tremendous heartache. And so I'm here to talk to you in general about housing and what you're facing. Most people don't know that between the year 1900 and 1975, the biggest problem for landlords in housing was excess housing, excess, all the way to 1975. And something occurred right after 1975 that began the process of the shortage. As you recall, for those of you who are old enough to remember, we suffered a significant inflation as a consequence originally of the petroleum embargo. That inflation rate caused increasing numbers of properties to have increased property taxes. And therefore came the issue of Proposition 13, and so on. Many people were losing their homes at the time because they could not afford the rise in the prices even when they had a fixed income. Now, as a result, housing did not grow to the pace of the influx of population in Los Angeles. And today, if you look at the corridors of Western Avenue going all the way down south, Figueroa, Vermont, you're going to see housing that is in very bad shape and is insufficient for the amount of area and acreage that they have. Los Angeles could easily build 1 million units if they had the opportunity to do so. But the ordinances that they put in place are so draconian that it prevented the growth necessary to take up the influx. What I'm asking you to think about is that of all the ordinances, if you were in city council for 16 years or 20 years, there would be no ordinance more important than the housing ordinance that you put in place. And I'd like to suggest that you give it the most thought and you become as expert as the city staff with regard to these issues. What I would like to suggest is that start with the least intrusive ordinance that you can, because you can always make it more complex. But start with the one that gives us the greatest impact for the problem that exists. And so I'm talking to you in general about this and making myself available to you to give you some additional background on the statistics that impact this important decision. It's one of the most important decisions you will make for Glendale ever. And I want to simply encourage you that you do what you did with the library. It became like the model library, the central library for all of the state of California. People come here from all over the place. And I'd like to see our ordinance that becomes the model ordinance that other cities will come and take a look at. So it is my hope, and I come here in a friendly gesture to really make you aware that the decisions that you make concerning housing, and you've done fantastic decisions in the past, that you continue that trend in making wise decisions for the city of Glendale that'll become a model for others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Molano, and welcome back.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions from Mr. Molano. A couple of quick questions for you. You mentioned there were some wise policies in place in the 60s and 70s. If you can elaborate on that a little bit. Also, two questions. Also, you said that on Vermont and Western and those streets going south from Los Feliz, I believe that's where you were indicating that the properties are insufficient, kind of not taken care of or dilapidated. What is the reason for that, you think?
When I was executive director for the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, we did a study on the aging of the housing in many of these properties. So by today's standards, it's a very large acreage. So if you were to take maybe a quarter of an acre, you'll probably find 10 families or less on a quarter of an acre. And I mean, that is for anyone involved in housing and development, you know that today you can build a significant number of housing there. What has prevented is that it really becomes incredibly difficult when a land or potential investor has to pay sometimes up to $100,000 just to get a family out of their property. And when you add it up, it adds significantly to the cost plus the delays that occur in getting those permits moving forward. Maybe it doesn't impact one property, but in the long haul, when you count the number of years since those ordinances in Los Angeles have come in place, the city was not able to keep up with the influx of population, especially as the population has increased. So I say that when I invested in Glendale, I really looked around for maybe 30 or 40 properties throughout Los Angeles County, and I chose Glendale for a reason, and I bought a new property back then. And it was because I found that it was a friendly place to invest. And of course, it was the vehicle by which the city was able to attract Armenians to come to the city, and the city grew. Anyway, that's my overall opinion on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rick Barnes.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members, and Housing Authority members. I'm here for two things. One, I was on a committee with the Planning Department, and we brought in all parties to how to expedite the Design Review Board. We did it twice, and I was on both committees. But one thing I learned from that was how important it was for discussion. And what I failed to see with what you guys are going to be going through tonight was the fact that a lot of these questions could have been handled by Housing Authority by having a meeting and having tenants talk to landlords and maybe even some of the apartment owner association members, stuff like that. But there's things that I hear constantly in these meetings, and I've watched them until 3 in the morning, because the value is there. There's a value of listening. And what I don't see is why are we doing it in front of you guys where some of the tenants, there's things that we can talk to each other. As a property owner and as a property owner that my wife and I have, we really do listen to our tenants. There's things that we do a lot. But one of the things that we see is that there's people that we're not hearing from. And by having a housing meeting, what we could have done is, I think, could have reached some real agreements prior to the arguments and some of the just the real anger that I'm seeing. And again, we have a lot of anger in our country right now. But for our own citizens to be so angry at each other for something that's simple to resolve, it really is simple. But it's one of understanding. And I would have loved to have seen you guys do that to the housing, is let us get together and talk. Let us come together and say, these are the hard points, and then come back to you guys. But at the moment, we take just even the simplest thing, and it becomes a big point. So I still believe that I love you guys because, I mean, I know you. A couple of you I've known a long, long time. Is the fact that we need to have some discussion, and getting those parties together, I think it could have worked. Anyway, so that's the first point. Two is I did something, I go to these realtor meetings around the state and around the country, and every time I go, I take low-income housing tours. And I got to tell you, one thing I've seen that we don't do here with low-income housing, I just did one in Palm Springs in the Indio area. 1982 is their housing started. But prior to that, 1942 was their first low-income housing development for farmers. And they still have that. Now they're tearing it down to build 380 units of low-income housing. In the meantime, on the same property that the city of Indio gave them, with some small exceptions, they built 245 units at the moment. They got 288 coming that are under construction. But what I saw there, what I saw in San Jose, what I saw in San Diego was really important, is that they did have to fight with the not in my neighborhood. But I tell you, every time I go to these properties, the people that are there, they have a fixed means of what their income is, and they have to be involved in that. But they're clean. The properties are absolutely beautiful. The one that we were at was 8 years old. It was like it was brand new. Honestly, it was brand new. The kids have classrooms after school. Parents are there. There's other support systems. People that have mental illnesses or some disabilities have guidance and some other people there on a daily basis. The kids have playgrounds, basketball courts. And if you violate the rules, you're kicked out. So the average at between up to $25,000, the average rent is $236 that they pay. The balance of it is then paid by the low-income housing people or government grants. But it was impeccably clean. The people that I got to meet they weren't dressed rich and that, but they had faces with smiles. There was things of pride with what they were doing. There was no graffiti, because if you did graffiti, your family was kicked out. So this is a program of 8 years. They also did another program, which is the next income up, so that if you got a job, and a lot of them do get jobs, there was another support system, housing, that was built for them. And then the next one up to $50,000. San Jose, the same thing. Beautiful building. Someone built, a multimillionaire, billionaire actually, built $2 million condominiums. He then took and developed them down lower, kept the same design, just smaller units. 38 in one unit. One was left after 5 years on Section 8 housing. Everybody had gotten jobs, and then what happened is they got jobs that exceeded the income. They got moved into the next building. And I got to tell you, we don't do that here. We listen to and I'm sorry to call it that, our historic society. We listen to the neighborhoods. They stop us every time. Indio, San Diego, San Jose, they all had the same problem. The city pushed forward. And I got to tell you, these developments all over the state that I've gone to are entirely different than what we've tried to do here. And yes, land is part of it, but we do have land. We do have things to do where we can make this work. So I'm hoping you guys will at least, let's talk to your folks and see what we can do. But they need to go to some of these places, look and understand how important low-income housing is in the community. I saw it myself. Anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Oral communications is closed. What's next, please?
Authority member and staff comments?
Are there any authority member or staff comments? Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We stand adjourned at 3:20 PM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.